Hello everybody. So I'm going to put in my third entry for my Secret Human History series, and so I could be putting in here the stuff about human migration, but we kind of already know that humans migrated from Africa out to other places. We know that from the fossil record. Fossil record isn't complete because not everyone who died became fossils. In fact, only a very small proportion. In fact, really, only people who died in really strange ways or were human sacrifices in caves. And of course, not all human sacrifices were in caves. Some human sacrifices were eaten, some were tossed off cliffs and their bones completely destroyed when they died, or thrown into fire and stuff. Those ones would not have fossilised. So it's really only the human sacrifices in caves sort of situation. Again, suggests that more people lived in caves than actually would have. In fact, the people that died in caves wouldn't have lived in caves because they were sacrificed in the caves. Now, some people may have lived in caves, so hiding out from whatever. But that's it wouldn't have been the norm. There's no possibility for the caveman myth to be true because, well, there wouldn't have been enough caves for everybody. A lot of people. And also, if there weren't that many people, then they'd be having to fight bears who actually did live in caves and other scary creatures. I mean, caves are not pleasant places to live. It's really quite terrifying things live in caves. You don't want that's not your first choice for a home. If you've got a choice of living out in the open and living in a cave, you're preferring to live out in the open. Except for, okay, so you got a bit of shelter, but you can sort of make a shelter. It's probably one of the least attractive places you could live is a cave. It's just not a good idea. But it stands to reason, though, that for a society to progress, not only to having human sacrifice in an area, but to have it in caves, which is a very special type of human sacrifice, they'd have to be there for a while. So if you're nomads, you're travelling from place to place, you're either not doing human sacrifice or you're doing it on the ground, and maybe even you eat the human sacrifice because you wouldn't be living in the caves. And so for a fossil to exist in a place, it suggests that people had to be there for a long period of time. So perhaps at least 20 or 30 years, probably more likely 200, 300 or more. Because you need to find the caves, and there's not that many caves around. You need to find the right kind of cave that's not already inhabited by a bear or whatever. And yeah, so you'd need to have a lot of different steps before you could get to the fossilisation thing. And otherwise it's an extraordinarily rare process. So I mean, let's just imagine that everybody is potentially nomadic and potentially not nomadic. So what would likely have happened is that people would have started off in a certain area of Ethiopia, let's say, and then they moved around to Chad and why would they move from Ethiopia to Chad? Well, probably because the first ones that started off too close to their old tribes want to run away from their old tribes, so they'd run away to somewhere else, and somewhere probably fairly close nearby so they're familiar with the plants and animals and all that. And then perhaps a big scary animal comes along and they go, oh, better run away from that big scary animal. Perhaps a big scary animal starts killing them and they can't defeat this big scary animal, so they just run, and maybe they go off in a certain direction, and maybe they have a group of places that they know are safe places to go to, and that's their safe travelling area. But then let's say that they decide that all 3 or 4 or 6 or however many of them there are, all of those places are all unsafe because they've all got big scary animals. Then they go and find another place, and you can sort of see that, over time you'd slowly but surely move to different places, not as a big migration, not as a little big holiday, but more as a necessity, because there's big scary animals, maybe there's a drought, maybe there's a big fire or flood or whatever there might have been that makes that area not a good area anymore, a place that, because they would go, oh, okay, this place is good, this place is not so good. And the places that are good for them, they're the places they go to. And when one place is attacked or whatever, they go, okay, pick up and go to somewhere else that they know is good. And it's only when they run out of places that are good that they go for somewhere new. And of course one place might be good some of the time, but then, oh, there's somebody else there, let's not go there, we'll have to go somewhere else. And so you'd gradually, you'd think you'd sort of go around in little spirals, little circular spiral sort of thing, and slowly getting bigger areas. But then maybe for whatever reason, maybe they're chased, maybe they're forced in a certain direction. So, and we know from the fossil record again that there's a certain order, and it you know, we display it in rough arrows, but it's not necessarily just like that. There also probably would have been fights amongst the tribe. Once a tribe gets to a certain size and you start having fights, instead of just having a fight leading to, you know, one person taking over and the other one being killed, a fight might lead to a split in the tribe. Maybe you get out to 100 people in the tribe and it splits to 2 lots of 50. One goes one way, one goes the other. And maybe even during one of these migration things, when they're like, well, all of our safe spaces are no good, which direction do we go, north or south? Half go north, half go south. No, if it was a big enough tribe that they could both survive. And you know, the migrations are not necessarily planned. They're more like big scary animal comes along, or big disease, or big whatever it is. I mean, when they'd have a big scary disease that starts killing them all, they're probably going to leave because they think they can outrun the disease and so forth. So these are how these migrations probably occurred. Now, I can't really comment any more on that than what we already know, because people already talk about that. It's pretty much established fact, and it's pretty well widespread what the facts of that are. So I don't need to add to that. So the point of these videos is not to add something that's already there. So I'm looking at what's not already there. And when we get up to what is perhaps the first important bit in human history, is when we went from, well, let's just say when we had our first religion. When did that happen? We know today we've got hundreds of religions, but when did that first religion happen and why? Was it, and what was it? Well, was it something that the animals believed when they were, before pre-humans, but when we were still apes, before we split off? Is that when religion began? Do all animals have religion? And they just don't speak it because they don't have the language like we do, and they don't have writing like we do, but they still have religion. Maybe they do. Maybe ants have a religion. Maybe lions do. Maybe they all do. Maybe cats and dogs and every creature has their own religion. That's quite possible. And if they did have them, and it's been speculated in a lot of different media, a lot of fiction. I mean, the Lion King, the lions had religion. In Watership Down, the rabbits had religion. And it makes perfect sense that animals would have religion. Sort of throws in the water all those atheist arguments that said, oh, you know, we made up religion to control people. Maybe we just always had religion. Always had some sort of belief and an understanding, not to sort of hurt each other, but just to try to sort of make sense of everything. And whether religion is true or not, it'd be aiming to be as true as possible, and aiming to be as truthful as it possibly could be. And if that's the case, so what is the oldest religion that we know of? A lot of people say, oh, that's the Sumerians. They were 8,000 years ago when civilization first began. Remember that's just a load of nonsense. That's not when civilization began. At least not if you believe carbon dating and fossils. But it's true if you believe the Christian Bible or Jewish or anything like that. Yep, sure. But not if you believe that people were alive before that. So when did religion begin? Well, not really with the Sumerians. Sumerians didn't claim to be the first religion. They said that they were already there when an Anunnaki came from the sky, from the Buru. And they were the Shinar. A bit later on, the Adamu were created. And But they were already there, they already had their religion, they changed. But what did they change from? What was the religion before that? Because we know that the Sumerian religion ended up being, well, all the modern religions that we have were created from there. But not all of them, but a lot of them. Most of them, say 95%. But there were ones that are not from them, that are older. Now these religions are named in different ways. One of the main ones that I know of is the religion of the Celts. That certainly predates the Sumerian religion. Now I know Celts was from Britain, but Britain was founded a very long time ago. Certainly before 6,000 years ago, a long time before that. And they of course fell into the sea and they became a lot smaller. They were a lot bigger before that. Got the Doggerlands, which is the sunken area. It used to be a big solid landmass all the way up to Norway. So the Celts and also the Druids and the Norse, as they say as well, the Nordics groups, and Germans and a number of other groups over there in that sort of general area of Europe, they worshipped fairies. And so a lot of people think, oh, fairies are this fictional thing like Tinkerbell. Indeed, Tinkerbell was a legitimate type of fairy, but there were a large range of fairies, and so it depends on which part of the world you're in as to what the fairies were called. And even if they were called fairies, they might have been called something else. So I'm actually including Africa, I'm including Asia, I'm including North America, I'm including South America, I'm including Australia. They all had some kind of spiritual beings that predate the Sumerians. And these are nature worshipped groups. So they worship trees, animals, and spirits. And so fairies, or something, perhaps they might not have always been called fairies depending on where you are, they were a part of it. I'm just using fairies just to make it easier. So if people talk about fairies as like, oh, this is this made up thing for fairy tales invented by, you know, Grimm or whoever, for things like Peter Pan and all that, it's not. Hobbits are made up, fairies are not. The difference between fiction and mythology is quite a big one. So mythology are things that are believed to be true by some people at least. So for example, if you have Cyclops, that's mythology. You have a Hydra, that's mythology. You have dragons, that's mythology in multiple different beliefs. You have fairies, that's mythology. Unicorns is mythology. Werewolves are mythology, vampires are mythology. Hobbits are not. Hobbits are fiction. Hobbits are just made up. That's particular versions of werewolves and particular versions of vampires are made up, and same as particular versions of fairies. So certainly these old beliefs, they all seem to be related to each other. Now, of note, vampires are a new belief. That's part of the Anunnaki related groups. In fact, that particular one comes from Christianity or Judaism. And a lot of people would say that's the same religion. I tend to think it's the same religion. Then as a group you call them Abrahamic, but you know, they're really just sects of the same religion, and so is Islam. And they in turn, in a lot of ways, derive themselves from the Sumerians. But the belief in fairies and stuff is completely unrelated. So fairies, elves, otherworld is what they call the place of the fairies. That's their version of heaven. And they used to have little tunnels that they'd go through and that humans couldn't pass through, and that took them from our world to their world. And it was said if you died and you were good, you went there. So that's basically heaven. Now that's not really related to all that. So essentially we had this old religion. Now whether it was religion from when we were still gorillas and apes and all that, or whether it was sometime later, we're not quite sure, and it probably doesn't matter. I'd say probably, from what we know of animals, they probably all do follow some sort of religion. Even your household cat and your household dog probably have some kind of religion. A lot of people have speculated that dogs see us as their master, usually. Not always. Sometimes you do the wrong thing and the dogs think they're in control. That's a problem with dogs. If you have a dog that thinks that they're the boss of you, that's not going to work out for you with the dog. Cats, on the other hand, usually think of you as their servant. We're servant to their cats. Cats are our overlords. So if you have a cat and a dog, the dog's at the bottom, human in the middle, cat at the top. I don't know how birds fit in. They're not really traditional pets, more recent pets, and they don't really interact in the same way. But so if you can sort of imagine sort of Lion King sort of religions for all the animals, so it would stand to reason that all animals would have some level of religion, at least in the terms of they would have a belief system that they would follow. Now, it may not be, it may be a genetic memory, it may not be written down with all the different things like priests and churches and all that, but it would certainly at the very minimum be them all believing in something. And who knows, maybe they do have churches and stuff, at least their version of them. Who knows? Or temples, or whatever it might be. Yeah, so that would seem to me to be most likely, but if not, and if maybe it took a certain level for us to get to religion, we at some point got to religion and ended up with this animalistic religion. This one where we have animals in certain roles within our imagination, our religious understanding, having animals that change shape, which is sort of akin to werewolves. And werewolves are part of that religion, by the way. Werewolves and fairies are in the same religion. And that's not the same religion as vampires. Just so people are clear on that. You should have werewolves and fairies in the same religion. Vampires are in the religion with the dragons. If you believe in dragons, you believe in vampires. If you believe in werewolves, you believe in fairies. Two different groups. So I know people are a bit confused, but yeah, so fairies came before dragons. Right? And we talk about how dragons are everywhere. Well, fairies were everywhere too, or at least some version of them. They may not have been called fairies. The different parts of the world might say, well, no, they're different. They're unrelated. North American Native Indians, as they call themselves, are not related to Australian Aboriginals, for example. But then we say, well, religiously, they are. They're very similar. They say, well, they're completely different to the Celtic Irish fairies. But there's a lot of similarities. So at some point in our travels, we went all around the world, humanity did, and we spread these religious beliefs before we had the Sumerian beliefs, which were 500,000 years ago. Now, that's not to say that all of the fairies, that the last one of them was created before 500,000 years ago. No, they could well have kept following the religion after we started having an alternative. And maybe we had other religions that we've just lost as well. But different versions of the animalistic religion seem most likely to be the first religion. And I just describe them as fairies just to make it easier, but it would seem as if that was our first religion. And so if we talk about the new religion versus the old, and you're talking about the old being ancient Greeks, for example, that's not the old. They're still the new. Might not be as new as the new, but the old one is really the fairies. And how long that lasted for, we can't be sure. But it kept going until the arrival of the Anunnaki 500,000 years ago, when the beginning of the new religion started. And it doesn't seem very new to us now. 500,000 years seems like a long time. But that is the new religion compared to the old religion. And so this is important when I talk about other things, but that's the old religion. Okay, that's it for me. Bye-bye now.